Today, we're diving deep into one of the most famous and perhaps most misunderstood stories in the entire Tanakh, the serpent in the Garden of Eden. For centuries, a single, powerful idea has dominated our understanding of this story. The serpent was Satan. It's what many of us were taught. It's what we see in countless paintings, movies, and sermons. But what if I told you that the original Hebrew text of Genesis never actually says that? Let's start by going directly to the source, Genesis chapter 3. The story begins, "Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field that the Lord God had made." The Hebrew word used here is nachash. This word, nachash, simply means serpent or snake. It's used throughout the Tanakh to describe a literal snake. For example, in Exodus, when Moses' staff turns into a nachash, nobody thinks it turned into Satan. It turned into a snake. The text in Genesis describes this creature as one of the beasts of the field, a creation of God, just like the other animals. It doesn't describe a fallen angel, a divine being, or a cosmic adversary. It describes a very, very cunning animal. So, where did the idea of the serpent being Satan come from? It's a fascinating journey through history. This interpretation wasn't common in early Jewish thought. Instead, it began to emerge much later, during the Second Temple period, which is the time between the construction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem around 515 BCE and its destruction by the Romans in 70 CE. This was a period of great theological development, and ideas about angels, demons, and a primary evil figure named Satan or Beelzebub were becoming more defined. Writings from this era, which are not part of the Tanakh, like the Book of Enoch or the life of Adam and Eve, start to connect the serpent with a fallen angel or an evil entity. For instance, the Book of Wisdom, a Jewish work written a few centuries before the Common Era, speaks of the devil's envy bringing death into the world, which many later interpreters linked back to the Eden story. This idea was then carried forward and solidified in early Christian theology. The book of Revelation in the New Testament famously refers to that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. This verse, written centuries after Genesis, retrospectively identifies the serpent with Satan, cementing the connection for Christian tradition. But if we stay strictly within the world of the Tanakh, what message is Genesis trying to convey if the serpent isn't Satan? When we remove the later layer of interpretation, the story's focus shifts dramatically. It becomes less about a cosmic battle between God and a super-powerful evil being, and more about something deeply human: the nature of choice, responsibility, and the origin of human struggle. The Nachash in Genesis acts as a catalyst. It doesn't force Eve to do anything. It simply introduces a question, a doubt. It asks, "Did God really say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" It plants a seed of skepticism. The serpent challenges God's command and offers an alternative perspective, that eating the fruit won't lead to death, but to wisdom, to being like God, knowing good and evil. The temptation here isn't a demonic possession. It's a slick, persuasive argument that plays on human desire for knowledge and power. This makes the story profoundly psychological. The real drama unfolds within the minds of Adam and Eve. They are faced with a choice: to trust God's clear instruction or to follow the alluring promise of the serpent. The focus is on their internal deliberation and their ultimate decision. By choosing to eat the fruit, they are exercising their free will. The Tanakh, time and time again, emphasizes human agency and moral responsibility. Think about the choice presented to Cain before he kills Abel. God tells him, "Sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it." The struggle is internal. If the serpent is simply a cunning creature, the story becomes a powerful allegory for the internal and external temptations we all face. The serpent can be seen as the voice of our own desires, our own pride, or the persuasive but harmful advice from others. It's that voice that whispers, "Go ahead. What's the harm?" It will make you wiser, stronger, more like the people you admire. The story teaches that giving into these temptations, to this serpentine logic, leads to consequences. It leads to a break in our relationship with the divine, represented by Adam and Eve's exile from the garden. Their banishment isn't just a punishment, it's a natural consequence. By choosing to define good and evil for themselves, they can no longer live in a state of simple, trusting harmony with God. They now have to navigate a world of moral complexity, toil, and mortality. The story isn't about blaming a devil for our problems. It's about acknowledging that human beings have the capacity to make choices that lead to hardship and separation from the ideal. This interpretation also changes how we view God in the story. If God is battling a rival cosmic power like Satan, it raises difficult questions about God's omnipotence. Why would God allow such a being into the garden? But if the serpent is one of God's own creations, a beast of the field, the story isn't about a failure to control a rival. It's about God creating a world with genuine freedom, where creatures, including humans, have the ability to use their gifts, like cunning or free will, in ways that can either align with or go against the divine plan. The risk of freedom is that it can be used to choose separation. In later Jewish commentary, the rabbis offered many different interpretations of the serpent. Some saw it as a symbol for the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that exists within every person. This is the internal impulse towards selfishness, desire, and rebellion. In this view, the serpent isn't an external creature at all, but a personification of an internal human struggle. This aligns perfectly with the Tanakh's broader focus on inner morality and the battle between our better and worse selves. So, when we read Genesis 3 through the lens of the Tanakh itself, we discover a story that is arguably more relevant and empowering. It's not a story that allows us to outsource blame to an external evil force. We can't just say, "The devil made me do it." Instead, it forces us to look inward. It tells us that temptation is a part of the human experience, and that we possess the agency and responsibility to confront it. The central lesson is about the power and peril of human choice. To recap, the word nachash in Genesis means serpent. The text identifies it as a creature made by God. The idea that this serpent was Satan is a later interpretation that developed centuries after Genesis was written and became prominent in Christian theology. By setting that later interpretation aside and reading the text on its own terms, we find a profound story about human freedom, the nature of temptation, and our personal responsibility for our choices. The serpent is the catalyst, but the choice and the consequences belong entirely to humanity. It's a foundational myth not about a cosmic war, but about the beginning of the human condition as we know it, a life of struggle, wisdom, and moral choice, lived outside the gates of paradise. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Tanakh. It's amazing how much is hidden in plain sight within these ancient texts. If you found this myth-busting exploration interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content that unpacks the rich layers of the Hebrew Bible. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next video.